Trey Murphy is ranked ahead of Brandon Ingram in Locked On's top 100 NBA players, and I'll tell you why that alone justifies the Pelicans trading Brandon Ingram last season. It's the Thursday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go!
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Thursday, and today we are going to look at Trey Murphy being ranked ahead of Brandon Ingram in Locked On's top 100 players. I want to get into some Herb Jones disrespect. You won't believe his ranking in this. This is flat out wrong. Then I want to look at the Pelicans players that didn't make it, including kind of a big surprise. Not that he didn't make the top 100, but that he's so low on the also receiving votes categories. We got a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. By the way, I'm just going to give it to you right now. Trey Murphy ranked 56th. Brandon Ingram ranked 63rd. It's close, but that matters more than you think. And we're going to break down that trade and kind of get some revisionist history, 2020 vision on it, I do think is important. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on YouTube as well. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network and become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Trey Murphy, 56, Brandon Ingram, 63. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I have no problem with this. I actually think Trey's too low and should be higher on this list, but Brandon Ingram coming in at 63 does not shock me, right? There's a reason the Pelicans traded him away. And as you look at these rankings, before we get into anything else here, I do think the Pelicans this in a sense justifies the trade because look, people seem to feel Trey Murphy has a higher ceiling potentially than Brandon Ingram, a former all-star, guy who at times was like a borderline all-star. But one of the reasons you trade Brandon Ingram is to open a surefire starting spot for Trey Murphy III. Now, it kind of sucks you got to do that to get him there, but when you look at Trey Murphy, when Brandon Ingram has been here 2 years ago in 23-24, when they made the postseason, Trey was injured to start the year, but only started 23 games. Brandon Ingram was in the way. Now, Trey can play the 4 a little bit, so when Zion goes down, you can pop him in there. But it was always a question of, going into this season, if everyone had stayed healthy, your starting lineup was going to be Dejounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, something along those lines. We never ended up seeing that sort of thing, but it was, where does Trey fit in? Do they need to drop Herb and put Trey in there? It was always trying to figure out, how do you get Trey into the starting lineup? You know how you make that a reality? You trade away a player that's in front of him. And that allowed Trey to blossom last year in this role. Once he was kind of entrenched as a starter, 51 games out of 53 games played as a starter, 21.2 points per game, 3.5 assists, 5.1 rebounds, shot not great from 3, 36%, but he's a career 38% shooter from 3, so we know he can hit that number on really good volume at 8.3 attempts per game, right? You needed to clear a path for him, and he went from 14.8 points per game to 21.2 points per game in that time period, right? Even if you do it at a per 36-minute basis, he went from 18 points per game to 22 points per game, which is still a pretty significant jump if all things are kind of equal there. That alone, creating the space, the room, the minutes for Trey to grow like that, justifies trading away Brandon Ingram, even if it was for a lesser return than we would have liked to have seen. And the Locked On Top 100 kind of bears that out. People are high on Trey Murphy very clearly here, right? He's ahead of someone like Dyson Daniels, who the Pelicans also traded away, but who had an outstanding year last year. You look at some of the other names, DeMar DeRozan, who's a proven scorer. He's ahead of him. Fred VanVleet, a lot of other names like that, right? And so to be above those guys, he's one spot behind Lauri Markkanen, which I think is kind of telling. He's 4 spots behind Joel Embiid. You're factoring injuries there too. All of that's to say is people think Trey can really take a big leap and be an impactful player for this team, right? And when you look at just kind of the case for him, makes sense. 6'9". He's one of the best volume 3-point shooters in the league. And when you watch how he's played every year he's been in the league, Trey Murphy has added something to his game. That's a really important thing. You've seen him add more of an in-between game, but more importantly, like Trey impacts winning better than Brandon Ingram did. And again, I'm glad to see it's bared out in the rankings here. You know, they weren't diving deep in cleaning the glass like I am, cleaningtheglass.com, a stats site that I use, probably to kind of come to this ranking. But when you look at the on-off impact, was your team better or worse with you on or off the court? Trey Murphy is ranked ahead of Brandon Ingram the past 2 years. Now, I don't really want to hold against Ingram last year. He was injured, just barely played. Year before that, also injuries. That's also a factor into all this. But still, the numbers don't lie on that. You know, the defense is better with Trey Murphy on there. The offense is about even with Trey Murphy on there. It's a little bit closer than you might think. But one of the things that jumped out at me is the free throw rate jumped significantly with Trey Murphy on the court versus Brandon Ingram. The Pelicans shot about 2 more free throws per game with Trey Murphy on the court. No, sorry, compared to where'd Brandon Ingram go? No, it's about 4.5 free throws more per game when Trey Murphy was on the court versus when Brandon Ingram was on the court. That's because Ingram, we know what his shot diet was. His shot selection was mid-range jumpers. But Trey is feasting at the rim or trying to get to the rim, really to yam and dunk on people, but also adding more of a layup package and that in-between game to let him get to the rim a little bit better. The team needs that. Free throws are the most efficient shot in the league. It's better than the corner three. It's better than rim shots. It's free throws if you look at it on a point per possession, point per shot attempt basis. The fact that Trey can help elevate this team when you have Zion Williamson who elevates the team with that. Dejounte Murray can elevate the team with that too. He's done a good job of drawing free throws in his career. If all of them are healthy, this team can live at the line. You don't need to worry about half-court offense if that's the case, right? There's your offense. It's boring. It might not be the most fun thing to watch, but it gets you wins and it gets the job done. And I think that's worth keeping in mind here that Trey just fits into this team better. And, if Ingram was still on this team, I bet he'd be ranked lower because people are just like, there's not really a fit there with Zion Williamson. Whereas Trey Murphy is the guy you kind of have to have next to Zion Williamson. He creates that space in a way that Brandon Ingram didn't and at times wouldn't. And look, Ingram is incredibly talented. He's one of the best mid-range scorers in the NBA and someone who can create his own shot, right? But do you get him the ball late in games to get you buckets? I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know. We'll see if Trey can do that as well. But it was the fit with Zion, not there. Not there at all. And with Trey, you don't need to worry about that. So when you look at this ranking and him being ranked higher, that's people factoring in the fit. It's factoring the growth that you think from Trey Murphy, and then also maybe posing a question of, does Brandon Ingram impact winning at the highest level? 63 is low. There's injuries there, right? That's factored into this. They told us to do that, even though I'm not sure if everyone actually did when you see like Tyrese Halliburton in the top 20 right now when he's not going to play much, if at all, next year. But this is basically telling us Trey has already surpassed Brandon Ingram and is going to surpass him even more so. And that alone kind of justifies trading away Brandon Ingram just to clear the space for Trey Murphy. That one kind of surprised me. Ingram's got a reputation, good and bad, around the league, and I was curious where it was going to fall in this one. Kind of putting him outside the top 50, I think, is eye-opening here, but that's kind of how a lot of very smart NBA people kind of feel about him here. So Trey's getting love in the rankings compared to Brandon Ingram. You want to know someone who isn't getting love? And this is appalling. I could go very hyperbolic on this, and I wouldn't be wrong. Herb Jones, you won't believe, 84th. I'll just tell you, 84th for one of the most impactful defenders in the league. Let's break it down and why my colleagues are very, very wrong on this one. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of the golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or just making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Play golf all the time, but look, you don't even need to play golf you need a pickup every now and then between Zoom meetings, a 6 a.m. round when you don't have time to make coffee. That's me here. Getting off a plane, coming right home to record a podcast, need a little bit of a perk. Grab a 5-hour energy here. That's how it's going to help you. And big golfer, love the transfusion drink. That's what all my buddies drink when we're out there on the course. So having that, and it kind of wakes me up. I absolutely love it here. Maybe it's going to improve my game when we play in 2 weeks here. So golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. And the grape ginger lime flavor of 5-hour energy transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the golf course or chasing down the beverage cart. So now you can amp up the fun. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. It excludes the Masters. Ends on October 31, 2025. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Don't forget, you can also watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday. For your second listen, it's Locked On NBA. There's a lot of Clippers news going on. There's some really weird, not great comments from Adam Silver about how people watch the league. I want to break those down maybe tomorrow, maybe later in early next week. We'll see. Probably in tomorrow's show. I'll tell you what those comments are and why it's actively concerning, in my opinion, what the commissioner said. We'll break that down, but they're covering it over at Locked On NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make them your second listen today. Let's keep looking at the Locked On Top 100. And truthfully, I don't have a ton of problems with it. I think I ran down the top 10, top 20 for y'all the other day. Jokic, Shea, Giannis, Luka, Curry, Ant, Wemby, Brunson, Mitchell, Tatum, Durant. LeBron James at 12 is kind of surprising. Halliburton, Anthony Davis, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Kawhi Leonard, Devin Booker, Kat, and then Jalen Williams is the top 20, with Jaylen Brown there at 21. Yeah, that's about right in some order. I don't really have a big issue with that. What I have a big issue with is Herb Jones being ranked 84th. I'm going to be good here. I could easily swear about this one. We're not going to do that here. 84th. What are we doing? Do we not value defense? Locked On. These are my colleagues, right? I love all these guys. Herb Jones is elite on defense. I don't need to remind you that, but apparently the league needs a reminder. Don't hope Herb sees this, because then I will get asked about it. But if Herb sees this, I hope it's something that he motivates him. Let's get a Herb Jones defensive revenge tour here. The Herb Jones, the guy that literally every show on Locked On was like, can we trade for Herb Jones? How do we get Herb Jones? And they rated him 84th. There's some hypocrisy there, in my opinion. That's terrible. I don't understand how you can kind of get to that number whatsoever with these guys. That is truthfully an absolutely awful thing, in my opinion, when it comes down to it. We forget that just 2 years ago, he more or less won Defensive Player of the Year, outside of guys that are big men. I'm trying to pull up my voting because I can't exactly remember where I put Herb, and I'll find it and share it with y'all. That's why if you're watching me, I'm like, where is it here? Where did I put Herb Jones? Let's see. I had him at 52 is what I had him at. No, I had him higher than that. I had him at 52. So behind Zion Williamson. That's about right. There's some limitations, I think, to his offense, which definitely hurts him, but at the same point, when you have someone that's that impactful of a defender, he can't be 84. It can't be 84. Defense matters in the league, and Herb Jones has proven that he's the type of guy that can help you significantly in that way, right? When we talk about that on-off stat, in an atrocious Pelicans year, Herb Jones ranked number 2 for the team in that area. He ranked 4th on the team 2 years ago when they won 49 games. Herb Jones impacts winning. He was a positive 6.1. That's 4th best on the team. These are all positive numbers too. 3 years ago, going back to his rookie year, what was he? It was probably going to be a positive 2. I'd be willing to bet. Yep. Okay. The differential going to his rookie year, let's look at this. Plus 9.6 when he was on the team, right? That's massive. His second year in the league, where's Herb Jones? Where did that number go? Plus 6.1. Zion Williamson was a plus 7.9. That's pretty close. The year they won 49 games, only 4 players were a positive. Herb Jones was positive 4.3. That's a phenomenal number. And then last year, when they were just so bad, right? Herb Jones, plus 11.7. That's the net rating when he's out there on the court. We're going to rate that guy 84th? What are we doing here? That's ridiculous, right? He's behind players like Brandon Miller, who has been a whatever player with injuries too, but nowhere near Herb Jones' impact of winning. Cooper Flagg, who's not played a single NBA minute, let alone game, ranks ahead of him at 80? That makes no sense. Herb's going to be a better defender than Cooper Flagg this coming year, and this was our top 100 for next season. Kobe White, look, great year, breakout year for him, right? Really did well. Should he be ranked ahead of Herb Jones? He's 73. He's 11 spots better. Like, get out of here with this. Michael Porter Jr., 79. They gave him away, not for free, but traded him away. The Denver Nuggets did. What are we doing with some of these ratings in the Herb Jones disrespect? One hand, I get it. He only played 20 games last year. There's been some injuries that he's dealt with here, but it's Herb Jones. Again, it's the guy that literally every show was like, how do we get Herb Jones? Let's trade for Herb Jones. 2 years ago in the 49-win season, he played 76 games. He's played 78 games, 66 games, 76 games, 20 games. He's flat out been good. 2 years ago, first team all defense, 5th in defensive player of the year voting, and the first non-big man on that list. In a sense, that's kind of winning defensive player of the year. Herb Jones is that good, right? He's shown the ability to shoot threes. He's 36.6% from 3 in his career. It's not like that's a bad number. It is elevated by one season 2 years ago where he shot 42%. But Herb Jones does all of the things you want. He's the ideal role player. To put him in the bottom 25 of the top 100 is a joke in my opinion. I don't understand this one at all. If you factor in contract too, he's got one of the best ones in the league. You could put Herb Jones on almost any contender, and they're better, right? We're not just saying any bad team. You could put Herb Jones on basically any single team in some sort of trade, right? And they're immediately better. He raises your defensive ceiling. He's shown an ability to hit open shots. He doesn't need the ball. It's a winning basketball combination as proven with that on-off rating here. So 84 is just disrespectful, in my opinion. Like, that one, the list rewards offense, flashy players, and not kind of being in a little bit of basketball obscurity, which I guess, there's like a New Orleans tax on this with them just not being good and people not believing in this team going into next year. Everyone's ranked probably lower than they should be. We already did the show on Zion earlier in the week. He probably should be higher, truthfully. Trey Murphy should be higher. Herb Jones, without a doubt, should be higher here, but he's not. You take, if you're trying to win, okay, if I give you Brandon Miller, Kobe White, Michael Porter Jr., I'm going to leave out Cooper Flagg because I think people would take him here, right? DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, Jalen Suggs. I like Caruso. Zach LaVine. You look at some of these names and you're like, I'm going to take Herb Jones over them every single time. Josh Giddey is 83, right? Like, you pick Herb Jones every single time. On a scale, here's what I'm going to ask you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how disrespectful or how incorrect is this rating for Herb Jones? 84th should, without a doubt, be higher. I really cannot believe this one here. If Herb Jones is 84, it makes you wonder, like, who didn't make the list at all. So let's look at the players for the Pelicans and maybe some of the other big names here that are not in the Locked On Top 100. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. Today and every day, we are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. This show, by the way, not written by AI. This one's all me here. So for your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Ross is never using AI for his show. That was a fun show to do, I thought. Y'all seem to like that one. We might use that gimmick, once or twice here. I'd be curious around the trade deadline to revisit that one and be like, what does AI say the Pelicans should do? And just see what goofy things it comes up with when we need a laugh here. Locked On Saints should be your second listen today. Ross Jackson's making sense of everything black and gold, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So those are the three Pelicans on the top 100 list. That's it. That's not particularly great, in my opinion. They don't have a single guy in the top 50. They do with Zion Williamson, but that's it. And he's like borderline top 50 at best. There's a number of Pelicans that didn't make it. We have like others receiving votes. Basically, our list went from top 100 to top 156, which I think is kind of funny. So let's look at like where some of the other Pelicans rank. Here's the thing. There's a lot of teams that don't have people in, the top 156. Pelicans actually have a lot. I don't know if that's good or bad. There's, a lot of players in the NBA. You end up going through a number of guys throughout the year, but right, there's 450 players kind of minimum in the NBA. So if you can get a bunch of guys in the top 150, let's call it, like that seems good. Not great, but good. So let's look at some of the other ones here. The closest to making the top 100 would be Dejounte Murray, who comes in at 112. If he wasn't injured, he'd be in the top 100, I think. He'd probably be getting around like similar to Herb Jones, maybe a little bit above him, maybe in the 70s, mid 70s, somewhere in that range, I'd be willing to bet. His offense is more advanced than Herb Jones is. So that would probably keep him up there. He's injured. I factored injuries into all of this. Some people didn't. That one doesn't really bother me. Jordan Poole at 119, I think is, misguided. Poole had a really good year last year. He was lethal with the ball in his hands in terms of being a pull-up shooter, like flamethrower good. I've shared some of the numbers here on the show. He's probably not getting some of the respect that he deserves. A lot of that is kind of toiling away in obscurity with the Washington Wizards the past season. And people probably feeling he's going to be obscure here in New Orleans this season too, as no one really has high hopes for the team whatsoever. So that's worth kind of keeping in mind when it comes to this, that, a lot of people just don't particularly like the Pelicans right now or think they're going to be good. So there's a Pelicans tax, it feels like. I think that if you're here, that number is just going to be lower than it would be otherwise when it comes to it, right? CJ McCollum, by the way, comes in at 98. So it's close-ish to Jordan Poole. I think Jordan Poole's a better player than CJ McCollum at this point. Not by a ton necessarily, but kind of in that range. To see him at 119 shows people are sleeping on the impact Jordan Poole can make. It's not guaranteed. He's got to do a little bit of an adjustment here. But he and Zion could be a very lethal combination, especially when you throw Trey Murphy into the mix. I do think Poole at basically 119 is too low here for what these rankings are. After that, it gets kind of interesting here. I just lost my place on this list. There's a couple of guys on here that I'm like, why is that guy so low? The only rookie that made the list was Cooper Flagg, and I agree with that. I didn't even put him on. I want to have seen you played in the NBA. But the Pelicans start to get some love towards the end of basically the 156. Jeremiah Fears comes in at 150. There's not a ton of rookies above him here, and I think that is an encouraging sign for how people view what this team could be. That's intriguing that he's like there and could make that sort of impact. And the fact that if you're on this others receiving votes, people put you in the top 100. So there are some big Jeremiah Fears believers out there, I think. What really shocked me was not that even in the 156. Like no one voted for Derek Queen for the top 100. Yves Missi got some votes, but like probably one or two in very low votes. He came in at 155 out of 156. For a guy that played as much as he did last year, that's shocking. Who played as well as he could, given that he's a big man that, needs someone to get him the ball. For what he did on a bad Pelicans team, basically, kind of playing more than anybody else. He played more minutes by 102 minutes than Trey Murphy, 73 games. Those are good numbers, I think, for a player of his, kind of stature and where he was, going into the season. 9.1 points per game, 8.2 rebounds, like, I don't know, 1.3 blocks. What more do you want? He's too low. I went on ESPN radio in LA with Andy Kamenetsky, one of our Locked On Lakers hosts, and he asked about Yves Missi, like, are they just completely turning the roster over? Is he available? And I said, I don't really know. And he's like, well, if Missi's available, color me interested here on the Los Angeles Lakers, and I would take him in a heartbeat. That might have more to do with their current situation and what's maybe not great, I think, for their center spot, even though they added DeAndre Ayton. But the fact that like other teams would want this guy, and they should want him. He's young. He's growing. He's just 20 years old last year. To see him ranked that low, again, people feel the Pelicans are kind of obscure, not in the like zeitgeist of the NBA right now. And clearly, like Missi is way too low here. In tomorrow's show, we'll probably build off this a little bit. What does Jordan Poole need to do to make the top 100 next year? Same for Missi, same for Murray, Jeremiah Fears. We could look at Derek Queen too. We'll look at all those guys. That's going to be in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with you all tomorrow.